Hello and welcome everyone to the main event. We are live, and while everyone's getting settled in the room, I am really pleased to be able to say hello to our guests today. Jeanette, hi.
Hi there.
And we've got Lisa, who is a menopause specialist. So
hello everyone.
Thank you for coming onto the session today, onto this webinar. Jeanette, we've sat in the room before and we've talked all things menopause a good few months ago now, but we wanted to move this forward today, didn't we?
We did.
Tell me what you've got in store for our audience today.
So that's brilliant, and we love being here. So it's great to come back to a nice, happy space again and working with you, Lisa. So Lisa and I today are going to take everybody through a brief workshop looking at how you can embrace change in your workplace, and particularly leveraging all the skills, expertise, knowledge and wisdom that comes from your menopausal staff.
Yeah.
We're going to take you through some of the legislation, which we know is a grey area. We'll look at what happens when you get it right and why you might want to get it right. And on the flip side, what happens when you get it wrong. So we're going to look at all of those things.
That's fantastic. And so, Jeanette, you have your own consultancy, and I know that you and Lisa work together outside of, outside of the room today. You both go out and do good in the world. We are, this is such a popular webinar today. And as you said, we've had so much in the news, and I feel like, all media do. It's great to raise awareness, but sometimes I feel like they're headline grabbing and they create more noise without direction. And that's what I really wanted for us to be able to do, is reassure all organizations, employers that, first of all, you've got to harness the knowledge, expertise, and longevity of women in the menopausal stage, because this age is 40 to 60. That's a huge demographic. People are going to be working to 70, so keeping people in the workforce at that age is really important. But as you said, Jeanette, the legal impact, I know even for me, and I'm in this game, it's been quite concerning that, we think we're doing it all right, but it'd be really good for everyone to have that reassurance and clarity today.
Yeah, brilliant. That's what we're here to help you with.
Awesome. So just before we jump in, so I'll do a bit of housekeeping. So usually the main events are around 45 minutes, but Jeanette has a workshop today, slides and a presentation, and to give everyone, whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching it as a recording, to give you the time to process and take it in, we're going to say between 45 minutes to an hour. It's also interactive, so as always we've got our chat box, which is really easy to interact with. So ultimately today's session is going to be as useful as the people in the room, so give us your thoughts. Let us know what you're thinking. Obviously, there's 3 of us here already, so we'll be talking a lot. But what you want to get from the session is most important, and that's what matters. Yeah. Finally, we've also got a poll. So we're asking everyone attending today, everyone in the room, what area of support do you feel your organisation needs? And we've got 4 areas. The first is legal. So that, again, comes with the Equality and Human Rights Commission updates and the legal implications of that, legal implications of not doing enough, and then the workplace adjustments, which would be part of the consideration for that, training and awareness, which is exactly what we're offering in the room today. And then we've put in other, because of course, there will be things that we haven't even thought about that you guys are facing, and with you here, Lisa, we can probably fix some of those challenges straight away, right?
Yeah, I'll do my best.
Wonderful. So thank you already. People are putting their thoughts in. Currently, it's nearly 50-50 between workplace adjustments and training and awareness. So we're definitely going to cover that. Plus a few different areas about menopause mentors and champions, and just creating an environment of collaboration, support, understanding, and championing each other. Whether we're talking menopause today, but ultimately we want an environment of, collaboration in a working space. That's what we all stand for, isn't it? So,
yeah, 100%.
Good stuff. Well, I'm going to ask for a shout out because I haven't got any hellos back. It definitely says there's a few people in the room. We've already got about 2/3 of the attendees registered, so that's fantastic and in the room. So if there's anyone out there, just give us a hello. Let us know you can hear us. you can see us. And while we're doing that, Jeanette, please go ahead and get the presentation started.
Excellent, everybody. So, as I say, we're here to look at how we can leverage the power of menopausal people in your workforce, and importantly, for organisational success. And that's what we all want, as well as making those staff feel supported. So, as we said, we're going to spend some time, we're going to look at a little bit about menopause, and this is where Lisa will come into this with her medical and clinical knowledge. We'll think about how we talk about menopause so that we can be inclusive, because we talk a lot about women. But as you'll see when Lisa talks, it's not just about women. So understanding how we can talk about menopause. We will look at the benefits that menopausal people can bring to your workforce. We'll look at the legal obligations, which I know at least 50% of you are keen to learn about. And we'll look at the various acts and how they impact you at work. We'll look at workplace adjustments, what they might look like, and actually quite how easy they are to do, which is quite a surprising one. Everyone thinks they're complicated.
Good.
We will also look at when you get it wrong, whether that is well-intentioned actions that don't land well, or whether actually you really do have a case that goes to tribunal, and we've got some case law to look at on that. And then we'll look at what it means to become that menopause mentor or champion, and why that's really important for the future. And as we said, there'll be opportunities to ask some questions as we go along.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jeanette. I just want to answer one question from the chat room, which is that Kirsty's just asking if there will be a copy of the presentation. Absolutely. So at the end of the day, we will send out a recording, which will be there for you to use, but also to share with your colleagues, because very often people come into the room, they get this session and they go away thinking, wow, I want to do this, I want to do that. Doesn't necessarily cost money, doesn't necessarily take up a lot of time, but you don't necessarily have the converted mindsets back at the office. So if you can share this recording with them, they can listen to it, they can play it in double speed, but they'll get an essence of where you're coming from. So definitely use the recording, and we'll make sure we get that out to everyone.
And I've also got a couple of handouts that I can share. One to help managers prepare for conversations around menopause.
Amazing.
And another one that is a nice, easy checklist that looks at some of the things you can do to cover workplace adjustments for some of the most common symptoms that you're likely to see. So it's a really handy little checklist that you can take away.
You know, Jeanette, before we jump into it, I just wanted to say, you know, we were sort of just warming up and talking about why this is so important to us. You've both got amazing stories about how you've ended up in this place today. And I know from my perspective in the main group, you know, we've always been about being on that talent journey with our business partners, our business community, whether that's recruiting, which is where it all starts, finding the right people. We know, especially now, how difficult it is not only to find great people, but to retain great people. And I'm a woman of menopausal age, and I know for a fact that as a leader, as someone that has to, you know, not only sort of have a role, responsibility, but also to be set an example for a culture and a behavior, the menopause can really knock women off their game. And I love that you're going to actually talk about how it affects other people as well, because it is all, it can have ripples everywhere in a negative way. And what I love what you said is it's actually quite simple to turn that, reframe it, and get the organisation winning. And I'm excited.
Absolutely. So a little bit about us. So I am confirmed postmenopausal and very happy to be in that space. I actually left my organisation at age 57 because of the menopause. I went into perimenopause around about the age of 47. I know that now, I didn't at the time. And I had quite a horrendous journey of multiple different symptoms showing up backwards and forwards to the GP, not actually getting the right support until I was about age 55. So it took that long before someone said, I think you're menopausal. And it was like opening the floodgates. But during that time, I didn't feel like I was getting the understanding from my employer. It was a bit hit and miss. I didn't know what was happening. And then people started to get promoted over me, or parts of my job were moving to other people. And I just started to feel invisible. And because of that, I was one of the 1 in 10 women that due to menopause leaves the workplace. For me, menopause has actually given me freedom. I started this work because I don't want other women to feel the same as I did. So that's my story. And Lisa?
Very, very similar. Got very personal experience. So I'm Lisa Watson. I'm a nurse by trade and have been qualified since 1989. So it tells you that's a long time. So working in the NHS a very long time. But again, I had a terrible journey myself. I'll tell you more about that when I talk about my slides about menopause itself. But yes, I got to the point where I almost left my profession thinking I couldn't do my job anymore. And it's all part of the symptoms, which I now realised. And when I finally realised what was wrong with me and got the help that I needed for my menopause symptoms, I was back in the room within about a week and completely turned it on its head. I was about to leave and they would have lost a very experienced professional. So I then went on to train very specifically for menopause care because I saw an absolutely gaping hole in the NHS that it wasn't being identified anywhere. It wasn't being given the training that it needed, so GPs weren't aware, clinicians weren't aware, and just the care out there was appalling. So I got very passionate. So I trained to be a specialist and I'm accredited by the British Menopause Society. So I'm very passionate about that. So I still work in the NHS and I do it privately because I love it.
And it is. We're so grateful for you and for people like you, because really this is the first time organisations are going through this, or perhaps it's the first time that it's been discussed enough, because yes, women in the workforce have been going through it for many years, but we are becoming a bigger and bigger part of the demographic of the workforce. And to lose, you said 1 in 10, but Jeanette, I think another 30 or 40% struggle.
Yes.
And don't succeed in their role. You know, they may not leave, but they're definitely not thriving. And again, the individual and the organisation. So there's so many human, medical and commercial reasons why everyone in the room today, you know, will go away with so many benefits from today's session.
So I'm going to talk about what is menopause, and it is going to be a whistle-stop tour through it, but more from experience. So basically, it's a normal phase. In humans, it's a normal phase. We run out of eggs, basically. We're born with a limited amount. They eventually run out, and that marks the end of our fertility. So end of reproductive phase. And it's a normal phase of life for most. You know, the odd person will have a surgical menopause or medical menopause because of cancer treatments or something. But actually, it's a natural transition for most. So the average age is 51, and as you alluded before, it can be anything from about 40 to 60 on average. It's a bell-shaped curve, so it goes like that, you know, with people at other ends of the continuum. And 10% will be early, and if they have their menopause from 40 to 45, it's classed as early. And if it's under that, under 40, it's a condition called premature ovarian insufficiency. And that will happen to sort of 1% of females. And even under 30, so you can get even teenagers having an early menopause and a premature ovarian insufficiency. And this is a really important diagnosis to get right, because it will impact their future health of their bones, their heart, their brain. It really is important. So very important to get this diagnosis, but the diagnosis isn't always straightforward. And I can talk from my own experience. I was working in general practice in a doctor's surgery. I had a Mirena coil in, which for contraception, stopped your periods for most women. I was completely unaware, uninstructed by my symptoms. I didn't have any periods, didn't even think about it. And I had the onset of a number of symptoms. So I had migraines start to appear. I hadn't had those since I was a teenager. I had aches and pains. I had palpitations. I started to get this creeping sense of anxiety and loss of confidence, and I then started not to sleep, and it just became overwhelming. And I thought at that point, oh my God, it must be the stress of the NHS. It's stressful, right? Isn't it? You know, And I seriously thought about leaving the profession, but at the same time was very, very driven by an interest in women's health.
Yeah.
And went to some training on menopause, and it was like the light bulb went on. I sat there and thought, oh my God, there is much more to this than hot flushes and sweats. Which
actually are not that common.
Exactly. You're right. It's a late symptom.
Yeah. And so many people actually think they're going a bit crazy. Like, what is it that's causing all of this? And
100%.
People are going to be in the room thinking, oh, so that makes sense why that person.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very late symptom, the hot flushes and sweats. So the symptoms of menopause classically will fall into 5 main groups. So you have your classical vasomotor symptoms, which are the hot flushes and sweats. But as I say, it's quite a late sign. Right. And that doesn't happen to everybody. You know, it's about 75% will have a hot flush of some sort. 25% is severe, but not everyone gets it, even though everyone will have low estrogen. So it's not necessarily linked. You have physical symptoms, and you literally start at the top of your body, you work down to the toes, you go inside and out, and you've got set receptors in all your cells of all your hormones. And so that means you can get symptoms from your scalp, your hair, your eyes can go dry, your itchy ears, taste changes, burning tongue, digestive changes, aches and pains, migraines, headaches, palpitations.
It's a joy.
Joint pains, brain fog, you name it. All these physical symptoms, literally from head to toe, inside out, they literally can be anywhere. And this is why there's such a huge list. Yeah. And then you can have mood symptoms. This is another group. So anxiety, low mood swings, irritability, loss of confidence, tearfulness, out of the blue. These are your mood symptoms. Then you have genitourinary, so anything to do with the waterworks or your periods. So it's all got the same embryological origin, so all around the pelvic floor. So your vagina can get dry, you can get painful sex, you can get increased risk of infections, prolapses, urinary incontinence. These are all symptoms relating to the genitourinary system. Yeah. Then, of course, you've got changes in periods, which, again, as I alluded to, sometimes it's hidden by your contraceptive. So if you weren't on contraceptive, your periods can sometimes get closer together because your brain is trying desperately to get you to ovulate. So it will hyperstimulate you to start with. You can get your periods getting a little closer together at first, and then you'll miss one. And then when you're finally, if you don't ovulate, you can sometimes get longer bleeding, heavier bleeding. So you can get terrible problems in perimenopause with menorrhagia, which is heavy periods. So, and eventually the periods will stop. So the diagnosis of menopause will come when you haven't had a period for a whole year and it's a natural period, or you've had your ovaries taken out, your womb taken out, that kind of thing.
Just before we move forward, I've just got a comment from the room about somebody that said they went to see their GP. Yeah. I feel like perimenopause is a more current phrase. And for this lady, she was told that she couldn't possibly be perimenopause because
I hear that all the time,
and that's from a GP. I mean,
it's shocking. And for me, this is why I'm so passionate about what I do. It's getting the message out there to GPs. Actually, what they should be doing is, if somebody comes to them, we're lucky that there is awareness sessions like this, because women are now knowing that actually there's more to this than hot flushes and sweats. It's actually all these other symptoms, and actually they go to their doctor saying, I think I'm perimenopausal. And then you've got the other side of it. So the GPs don't always know that actually this woman could be perimenopausal. What they do is they run a panel of bloods, they do their hormones, they go, no, you're all right, you're not menopausal. And the woman's left going, well, what's wrong with me then? Actually, no, you can be perimenopausal.
Without the blood test.
Normal. They are normal. There's no point doing them sometimes. The only time you do them is to actually diagnose proper menopause or other conditions. And actually, you can be perimenopausal and have completely normal profile of your hormones. And this is what throws a lot of people out of scent. I always give a trial of treatment. Say, well, do you feel better? Yes, you do. There's your diagnosis, but you rule out other things first.
Yes.
Right, I'm going to quickly go on. So it can affect. I'm being
doing this
hurried
bit.
here. Yeah. So it can affect you personally. It can affect your relationships. It can affect your ability to work and your work performance and your productivity, or you might leave. But also then you've got your transgender males, and I see a lot of transgender patients who have female anatomy and female hormones, and yet they present with their transgender male name, and to all intents and purposes they are male. And actually this is a big confusion for many people. It makes it very hard for them to approach GP, approach their employer, their colleagues, and then you have to be very careful about conversations and disclosure, and this is where Jeanette comes in and will take over. But if there's any other questions later, put them in chat.
It sounds like a joyous time, doesn't it?
I think for employers as well, it's probably a relief knowing that actually this person hasn't disengaged in their role. They haven't, you ghosted you. They haven't changed. They're actually going through something, and they can be helped, and it can create engagement again and bring back productivity.
It can be so confusing for employers, for managers who see somebody who was otherwise
brilliant,
highly productive, high performing, suddenly all of that seems to fall off a cliff. I know my manager said to me, "You're not your usual self," and I don't know what's happening. At the same point that I didn't know either. So at least you can open that conversation and start to work that through.
I tell you what, I had a team member in a strategy session say something like, you look like you've left the room, you don't seem to be in the room, sort of thing. And I thought, do I? Yeah. And you almost don't even realize what you're doing. And it's really, it helps everyone to understand that there is a way to improve the quality of your experience through this at work, with all of your colleagues, with your loved ones, all of it.
And that comment is really important where we're thinking about language. Actually, the way that person delivered that message to you was supportive, and you were able to recognize something. Yes. It isn't always done that way. And language can really alienate. 100% can alienate. I had a client say to me yesterday, I had the worst hot flush ever at the weekend. I had an orange jumper on and you couldn't tell the difference, and I was sweating buckets. And my young sister-in-law turned around and said, "Well, it is rather hot in here." She said, and I felt like she was belittling how I felt. The other lady was trying to support her. And that's some of the pitfalls that you can fall into. And humour is something we always used to talk about, a woman of a certain age and the change and all that sort of stuff that was done rather humorously. But actually, humour is very, very individual to the person and to your culture and your background. So actually using humour, and we'll look at the Avanti West Coast, where they really tried to do something very supportively, suggested by a member of their menopause network, based on what she thought was humorous, take a bit of a light touch. It fell like a lead balloon and detracted from everything. So I would avoid that because it was a shocker. Just avoid making humour or making jokes. Ask the people, how do they want you to talk about this? Build that shared understanding. As we said, it's not just about women. We talk about women here because it's the easiest way to do it. But we have lots of people in our communities and our workplaces with different gender expressions and identities, and we need to be mindful of that. Transgender, as Lisa has already said, can present issues in how you talk about things and also confidentiality. But if you are starting to do that education, that awareness raising, you will, as an organisation, be able to develop a shared understanding of what menopause is and a language that people are comfortable with and works with your culture. So it's always important to be mindful of how we create that inclusivity through our language.
Thank you, Jeanette. Listen, before you move over to the next, I know we're trying to be quick on this as well, but I've just had a comment from the room again about another GP experience, about HRT. And, often people have the doctor's appointment, come straight back into work, either they're, on a Zoom meeting or they've come in the office and they're feeling really fed up and led down by the medical professionals. Like, what? Again, I'd love for you to sort of cover a little bit of that as we talk further today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want me to cover that at the end?
Yeah, if that's all right. Yeah,
how to approach GP.
Yeah.
That's something, if we got time.
Yeah, I mean, this is the difficulty. It can be a very isolating and very difficult and challenging experience for a woman, and especially if she's feeling like she's not getting that support. It's how do you hold her hand in the workplace? And as you know, we want our staff to bring their whole selves to the workplace, but we're always going to have those worries. If you've got a health worry, that's going to be biting away at you and taking some of your concentration. So it's really about having the more well-being conversations and making it okay to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And really, why would we want to take it seriously? I mean, menopause has been around for years, as long as we've been on the earth.
Yeah.
But obviously, we're all living longer, we're working longer, and we can be productive for longer. So menopause now happens roughly in our middle age, and we can have 40 years of life plus left. And, if we're working till 65, 67 or beyond, we want to make sure that everybody can be in our workplace.
Yes.
And supporting menopausal people at work can have multiple benefits. Firstly, it can reduce absence. So actually, if you are supporting people, having the conversations, giving them outlets, having people like Lisa on your books who can help, then they're more likely to be working in the workplace.
Yeah.
I think it's a 40-odd% of women take time off due to menopause and don't say that's what it's all about. So having the right policies that support menopause, it can increase productivity and performance. We all know when our staff feel cared, valued and supported at work, they put in more, which if you're thinking about organisational success, you want that. You want them to be doing more.
Yeah.
It can make you an employer of choice, because actually your staff will be out there talking about what it's like to work for your organisation. Yeah. And with menopausal people being the fastest and largest demographic in the UK, they will be talking to their friends and saying what a great place it is to work. So it will actually help you to hire the right people. It can also, if you're supporting those women, you're not going to lose them as quickly, so it can cut down on your hiring costs.
Yeah.
It can improve staff retention. That's a big one. We want to hold on to these staff, which, as we said, you may have invested 20 years, in training, getting them to understand your culture. They've got all that wisdom and knowledge. Yeah. That's going to take forever to rebuild. You don't want to lose that.
It's a high impact to lose people.
Yeah. And also doing the right thing, supporting these staff will protect you legally. It will protect you from what can be unlimited costs if you're taken to a tribunal and the claimant wins. And that has reputational knock-ons as well. And then, of course, it helps with the diversity of your workforce. Actually, having people of different backgrounds, different ages, different experiences will help you to have better idea generation, problem solving, and again, it will encourage people to want to come and work for you.
And improve profitability. So
absolutely. So legal obligations. This is the one that I have to refer to my notes because it is quite a grey area in the UK.
Okay.
We have two key pieces of legislation that support workers in the workplace. That is the Equalities Act 2010 and the Health and Safety at Work Act 1975. Okay. Both place legal obligations on employers to safeguard and look after the well-being of their staff. And particularly with the Equalities Act, to guard against discrimination, either direct or indirect, based on some protected characteristics, the key ones, age, sex and disability.
Okay.
Now, there isn't a protected characteristic around menopause. The government last year chose not to enshrine that in the Equalities Act because technically menopause is covered under sex, age and disability.
Okay.
The Equality and Human Rights Commission have come out in the past couple of weeks and actually made it very clear that menopause can be covered under disability discrimination, which puts extra legal obligations on employers.
Yeah.
Whilst menopause is not a disability, it's not an illness. But 1 in 4 women will actually experience severe and debilitating symptoms that impact their ability to carry out their work. Those symptoms, if they last more than 12 months, which sadly for some women, and certainly for myself, it was 7-8 years, because of the longevity and the severity will mean that they will be covered by disability discrimination. Under that, you will need, as an employer, to work with that individual and arrange workplace adjustments to support them to continue to work and work at their best during that time. And if you don't, you could be at risk of a tribunal and legal costs if you're found to be actually not supporting and being, putting menopausal staff at disadvantage. That's the key thing that the Equalities Commission have made clear to employers. It's not something to be afraid of, because there are good things you can do, but it's just being aware of those obligations.
And people aren't, I think for a lot, seeing the word menopause and disability in the same sentence, it was quite frustrating for women who are menopausal, because they don't want to be seen as, difficult to have in the workplace, and for employers not really having the clarity on how to take care of them and how to support them. Have you got some examples of reasonable adjustments, or if you're coming to that, we can cover it?
No, that's all right. We're coming to that. So, the key thing on in your workplace is to have policies that cover menopause. If you have a menopause policy, standalone policy, fantastic, and we could help you with that, or your HR team can. But if not, maybe a wellbeing policy, or just go through your policies with that lens of how would this work for someone experiencing menopause. So your absence policy is a key one, where someone might be presenting and taking multiple times off because of various different types of symptoms. It's thinking about how can we bring those together as menopause and reduce that kind of the triggering aspect of our policies. So that is one of your really big things. And then to do reasonable adjustments. So reasonable adjustments, and I keep using the word as well, the phrase is actually the workplace adjustments where menopause is concerned.
And is that because it's now under the disability heading that it has to be workplace and not reasonable? It
is again a grey area, because menopause isn't a protected characteristic. But then again, every workplace adjustment needs to be reasonable in terms of what the individual needs and what the employer needs. So it can be a bit subjective, but that's where it comes in. And there can be various different ways that you can think about workplace adjustments. These don't have to be permanent adjustments. They should be temporary. They should be reviewed on a regular basis, because, like all things, menopausal symptoms change. So one symptom someone was experiencing really badly early on may disappear, something else may come in, or they may not need adjustments any further. So it's an ongoing conversation. But you can think about really simple things as making changes to the work environment. So if you do have someone who's presenting with hot flushes, see if a desk fan might help. Obviously work with them, or have areas in your office which might be able to move the blinds down if the sun's shining, or where you've got temperature controls that they can adjust personally themselves. Sometimes actually just getting away from being on a desk with 10 other people where you get quite hot and bothered. Actually being able to go to a quieter space can help. Thinking about their work arrangements. For me, I started to work more flexibly with a mix of working from home and working in the office, because insomnia and sleep disturbances were massive. And I was so fatigued that getting up, doing the commute, all of those things were really creating extra problems. So I would get into the office and would be so annoyed by the commute and tired. I wasn't at my optimum. When my boss and my manager, we talked about it, we arranged that actually if I'd had a really bad night, and it wasn't every night, if I'd had a really bad night, I had the laptop, I could work from home and just let him know. And it was so much easier. And to be honest, I didn't use it that often, but knowing I could, and every time we met, we would have that wellbeing conversation. How are things feeling? Not how are you, how are things feeling for you today? And it was just so supportive. You can do things like having more water stations available so that you can go up and get more water, making sure that you have period products in your toilets.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you have the gender neutral toilets, making sure you've got extra facilities in the cubicles. There's a lot of very simple things you can do that will make a difference to the individual. But always ask the individual, what's the symptom that is causing you the most problems at work? And what's the thing that I can do that will help you most?
And you're putting this in a handout, aren't you? That's going to go out with the recording. So I'm
really simple things. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be difficult.
Yeah.
And most importantly, it doesn't have to be long term.
Yeah. And I know from a sort of leadership, management, support perspective, every relationship will have a different rhythm, right? So you might have one-to-one on a weekly basis. You might say, well, let's look at menopause once a month. Like, it doesn't have to be. But there's two questions you mentioned I think are good for any employer to ask.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's get into the habit of checking in holistically. That's my big thing, is don't look at your employee just as a worker. Look at them as a whole human being. And visit them as an individual, as somebody with a family and responsibilities outside, but also what they do at work. So that protects you on the right path.
Yeah, absolutely. As an HR professional with over 20 odd years experience, which is my background, I used to say that my biggest job was putting the human back in HR, which sounds crazy. But my manager, we used to have a one-to-one weekly about tasks. So he used to keep work separate. And then every other week, or as needed, we would have a wellbeing conversation. I did that with my team because actually keeping them separate worked really well, because you weren't then afraid that if I say I'm struggling with this on menopause, that it's going to affect how you see my performance.
Oh, I like that. Very interesting.
So keeping it separate. And a lot of women don't disclose their status for fear of being negatively viewed or it impacting, they're not getting the plum rolls, the sexy stuff that gives them visibility because, oh, she's menopausal, she might show up that day and be in tears or angry.
And you know what? It's quite frustrating, but it's really still rife out there. I've been talking to a lot of women, senior women, who say it can still feel a bit like an old boys club, which is so disappointing.
It is really
in such a progressive world. So actually, as you said, education, training, understanding, normalizing, and giving support. The lab gives us more power to hold our space and smash it.
Absolutely. And you know what? There are going to be times when we get it wrong. We sometimes don't have these conversations for the fear of getting it wrong.
Right, yeah.
Well, if you keep fearing that you're going to get it wrong, you know what? You'll get it wrong. You've got to dip your toe in the water, and with support from people like us, actually make that step. So looking at a couple of cases, the Avanti West Coast is a really interesting case. And the sad thing is that one slightly misguided suggestion and activity has completely wiped out all of the good work that they had done on policies and to become more menopause friendly.
Okay.
So they have a women's menopause network, which first off, massive tick, definitely. It's a train company, which is probably hugely male oriented, but they have a menopause network who support staff and have been working really hard to change the culture. A suggestion came through, wouldn't it be nice if you could give a goodie bag or a gift to our menopausal staff? Which again sounds like it could be good. But let me just read out what they thought they put in there. This was, let's help them with their symptoms. So we had a fan. Oh, that's ideal for hot sweats. They had a jelly baby sweet in case you feel like biting someone's head off. A tissue if you're feeling emotional.
Oh my God, I know.
This is the one that really bugs me. A paperclip to help you keep it all together.
So patronising.
A pencil to write down the things you might forget. Now, yes, those are symptoms: hot sweats, mood swings, emotions, brain fog, feeling like you don't know what you're doing anymore, and writing things down. Yes, but actually that was seen as really insulting.
Very insulting. And undermining the women. It's just
exactly. I mean, the trade union were very scathing, as you would expect. Unison were really, really bad. And then I have here the quote that an Avanti spokesperson said, This is a gift bag designed and created by our own in-house menopause support group and derived from a suggestion from a colleague based on her own experience. And as we said at the beginning, everybody's experience is different. Everybody has different cultures, different beliefs, different ideologies and backgrounds that they bring to the workplace. The humour that the lady had put in there worked for her, but did not work for others. And it's so important not to make someone else feel irrelevant and belittled.
Don't impose your approach.
Yeah. And that has completely overtaken Avanti West Coast's reputation as a good employer.
Gosh.
It's unlikely that they're going to be seen as an employer of choice for this growing group of women.
Yeah.
And they may even lose women. And that is such a shame when they have done so much and having a network, having good policies, doing the menopause friendly accreditation. That has just been completely washed away. Yeah. That curve of confidence, as we've talked about in networking before, has completely been blown down. Their credibility is lost by one misguided activity.
Yeah. And a quick question from the room again, and I like to answer them in real time because they might have relevance to what we're talking about. But on the basis that, you know, companies can get it so wrong, is having a menopause policy a legal requirement, or is it a recommendation? Where does it stand?
It's not a legal requirement.
Okay.
Again, if we had menopause as a protected characteristic, it would be, but it is a very good piece of advice.
Yeah.
And best practice.
Yes, I would agree.
It's best practice to have it. And, you know, I would personally, as an HR professional, I'm not a fan of different policies like that, because if you have a policy for menopause, you need it for the male andropause and you need it for mental health and all sorts of things. I would rather it would be wrapped up in a wellbeing policy or as part of your other policies.
Okay.
So it's just considered.
Yeah.
But if it's your first foray into looking at this, having a menopause policy is a great place to start, because it signals to your staff, hey guys, we're serious about this.
Yeah.
You know, we're serious, we've thought it through, but get your menopausal staff involved in that conversation.
Yes.
There are templates that you can get. What would menopause support look like for them in your organisation? And then you can build it into your policy. So they're part of the solution and not just the problem.
And so often, I mean, and this is our business, but we get invited in to train and you get invited in to advise, and most of the answers are already in there. We very much hold the space for those that are in, you know, in that situation to then make known what they need.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The answers are always there in your organisation, but often you're just a little bit afraid to pull that Band-Aid off in case you pull it and you cause more problems.
And that's why it's quite good to have an external consultant.
Yeah, exactly. And again, if you get it wrong, you could be taken to tribunal.
Exactly.
And what you need to recognise, if you're taken to tribunal under disability discrimination legislation, the payouts can be unlimited, which is a massive issue. Yeah. I have one case that was in 2019. It's in a retailer, so may not be appropriate, but we can have a think here, of a senior supervisor who'd worked for the organisation for a very long time. She'd felt that her manager was ridiculing her as she went through menopause and felt quite bullied and harassed.
Yeah.
He actually called her a dinosaur, which I think is awful, and encourage other staff to laugh along with his comments. So it began to be a big ripple.
Yeah.
During a restructure where her post was unaffected, others he encouraged to apply for her role, which again, we know as good employers is not good. No. As a result, she suffered significant sickness absence, mental health issues, and really loss of confidence. She did eventually return to her role on shorter working hours as a phased return, which we all know. But her manager decided, no, I don't need to follow that. I don't need to follow HR and occupational health guidance. I'm just going to put her right back on to full-time and these duties. Obviously, it wasn't good. And she did actually suffer a complete breakdown as a result of the, you know, what she felt was bullying when she returned to work. And she put a claim under age and sex discrimination, which was actually upheld. She was awarded £28,000 which doesn't sound a lot, but for this particular retailer in this climate, it probably was.
Yeah.
£10,000 was loss of earnings, but £18,000 was injury to feelings.
Yeah.
And it's so important that we don't get it wrong. You know, one of those things is it was upheld because he ignored the medical and the occupational health advice.
Yeah.
Do not ignore it. If you use occupational health, follow it, use it, and make sure, as the legislation says, that your other staff actually understand the situation and can work those reasonable adjustments as well.
Yeah.
But again, make sure that the individual in the centre of this conversation is comfortable with how much you share and with whom.
Yes.
And just be mindful, which is always my conversation with people.
Yeah. And it's making that time, isn't it? And being present. I think so many managers get caught up in the day-to-day, the work. They don't, and especially with remote and hybrid working, it is harder. You have to be deliberate in the conversations, in the checking in the understanding.
Yeah, hybrid working means that we have to work harder with those conversations and those connections. And we know that problems can get bigger when you're remote because you can't deal with them as easily.
Yeah. Now, one of the questions, again, from the room, following on from the menopause policy, is whether a well-being policy is a legal requirement. I don't think it is, but again, it is best practice. And
correct. It's best practice. Your legal requirements on policies would link directly to employment law. So they're going to be things like performance management, attendance management, flexible working, absence management. I think I should know them all, shouldn't I, with my 20 years?
Condensed hours, all sorts of things like that. Right? Considered.
Yeah, absolutely. It is good practice to have it.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be full foul of legal legislation if you don't have it. And again, practical tips for employers: look at your policies. Either have a menopause policy or a wellbeing policy, or just do a risk assessment of your policies. Actually, does our policy cover menopause? So what do we do in our recruitment policy? Do we make adjustments for people if they say they're menopausal? Do we ask that question like we would for somebody who has a physical or an invisible disability?
Yeah.
And think about, do they support people? If you've got occupational health, or you're lucky enough to be able to supply private medical cover to your staff, actually make sure that you have opportunities for them to really talk to the right clinicians. If you have GP surgeries as part of that, fantastic, because getting a GP appointment, we know, can be difficult.
Yes.
Lisa said you don't always get the right advice.
Yes.
But do they offer access to gynecologists, menopause specialists, or can we put a menopause specialist on our books that staff can access? Because that will really help. Think about your work environment. Think about the language, the inclusivity. Actually, is it good for your staff? Is it something that, they can access the facilities they need at the time they need? Think about how you open a conversation about menopause, because as soon as you do, that starts to change things.
Yeah.
So think about what education, what training. Can we do menopause cafes, which are just an opportunity for women to come together and talk about what is bothering them and find solutions from within their peer group.
Yeah.
And of course, think about your reasonable workplace adjustments. What can you do to support them, and how can you give managers the support to know that they're empowered to do this, that they can have these conversations? Yeah. If you can do menopause risk assessments, which you can get information on that from ACAS and also from the HSE, that's even better. I've seen those working really, really well.
And you've got a framework, haven't you, that you can live by and work by, and that gives everyone that feeling of support and confidence in the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I've been very, very bad here, and I've taken the Menopause Friendly Accreditation trademark from HEMPICT, which is an organisation that I work for and work on behalf of. But actually, creating a menopause friendly workplace, as we've seen, is going to be really good for you in terms of productivity, performance and profitability, those 3 Ps. But actually, you do have a legal duty to look after your staff, look after the well-being of your staff, to do sufficient assessments of the workplace, look at the health and well-being of your employees. And that includes making reasonable adjustments, workplace adjustments to support staff experiencing menopausal symptoms. But also, this will ensure that the symptoms that the individuals are experiencing isn't being exacerbated by their job or their workplace. So it will actually be part of the solution, which is really, really good.
Yeah.
And think about risk assessments, as we said. There's some great templates. They're usually used as, health and safety or the individual risk assessment for stress. Actually, the questions you can quite easily adapt to cover menopause. Yeah. It's the same thing of giving you a framework to have a conversation that could otherwise be quite difficult.
So we talk about medical first aiders, we talk about mental health first aiders. What would the equivalent be in an organisation? What would the menopause support look like on an ongoing basis?
Yeah,
so look at that.
Perfect.
There you go. It's like we planned it. I always think I am a mental health first aider myself, and I think that the skills that you learn through that are really applicable to having a conversation and supporting someone who might be displaying menopausal symptoms and not be aware or not really know where to come from. So you can build menopause champions or menopause mentors. It can be absolutely a specific role that somebody takes on. Make sure that you're finding the right people. Often you will get volunteers. It was something I did in my organisation because I was having a tough time. I set up a menopause cafe network so that we brought people together to talk about what was happening and get that peer support. But it can be a proper role with objectives if you want to. It gives your staff an outlet, somebody else they can talk to outside of their line management, who can signpost them to other help. They're not there to diagnose and say, yes, you're definitely menopausal and you need to do this, but they can say, have you done this? Think about that. So they can be that hand holding. They can be, mostly they are women, because women tend to take on these kind of almost voluntary above and beyond roles like mental health first aiders, working in diversity. It's something we do. But I have seen some guys as menopause champions simply because they've got partners going through it, so they understand it. And they want to work with other men. So men that might have the partner experiencing it or think, oh my God, my relationship's really struggling, or I'm struggling with this employee, can have someone else to talk to. It's very much about what will work in your workplace. If you have staff networks, talk to them. Actually ask them, is there a demand for this? If we did this, who could run it? Would you be interested?
And it doesn't have to be time intensive. You can do a text poll. You can ask for anonymous recommendations if people don't want to sort of stand up and talk about, there's so many ways that you can interact without it being costly or time consuming.
Exactly. Again, menopause cafes do run in the community. They're done on a not-for-profit basis. There's no fees. And again, I always say, actually, if you have menopause champions and people talking about it in your workplace, remember that a menopause network not only supports the individuals, but it's a fantastic feedback loop for the organisation. What's working, what isn't working. If you get the people that are representing the problem, come up with the solution, so long as you don't get it wrong like Avanti, you can actually really build that engagement and motivation and support with your staff.
And if there's a policy or a structure that is ingratiated into the organisation, people around it will have the confidence and understanding of how to approach and engage and support. So it's ever increasing benefits.
Absolutely. And again, it helps with having that conversation. It's a little bit, in one organisation I worked at, I started a tea and talk session because we wanted to talk and raise the awareness of mental health. And there were 3 of us that were passionate about this. We did it on no money. We said, actually, you bring the tea, we'll go to the co-op and get some biscuits. So a little bit of give and take. We shared our stories of how mental health and anxiety and things like that had impacted us, how we'd overcome it. And people started to open up and talk about it. And it was very easy to do. And again, for me, being a mentor, a champion for mental health, and definitely my passion on menopause, means that what I'm doing is I'm helping the future generations. We want the generations coming through at work to have an easier and better time than we did. We don't want them to go through what we may have done.
No.
And also, I've always spent my life championing women. So I want more women to stay in the workplace and actually start building that economic stability for themselves, and also helping the companies with their knowledge. Diversity is huge. So, we need to keep these women like Lisa and I in the workplace for longer, not walking away from it, because we can then show the women and other staff coming through, look, you can do it.
Yeah. Well, they say, if you can see it, you can be it. And if we can get this right, then it just continues, over time. So
yeah, I'm not going to do the conclusion slide because we've kind of covered that.
Yeah.
It's a chance now for other questions.
Okay.
There are links there. So if we don't get to your question, or you have something that you feel is not appropriate on the open forum, either Mita, I know you will collect them, but come to Lisa and I separately.
Yeah.
I've got a lovely QR code there. So all those people that are sitting out there, if they're happy to take a quick scan, feedback would be really useful, because we want to make sure that we're hitting the right mark for people.
Oh, thank you. Well, I would say if there's anyone in the room who has a question or a comment, please let us know. We're here for a few more minutes while we, I'm going to check the poll actually while we're seeing.
Yeah, interesting.
So very interesting. So we didn't have any for legal, so you obviously did that very well, Jeanette. Thank you. Workplace adjustments came in at 38%, but training and awareness a whopping 55%.
Yeah.
So exactly what you've done today is, and yet, I think even for myself coming in, I thought, I think I know everything, and yet I've made a handful of notes. But also, Lisa, right away when I met you, I was saying, well, I have a wellness hub for our people in the company. We quarterly, give people wellness sessions, but I didn't have a specific menopause champion there, so we're going to be talking about that afterwards. So
yeah, definitely. I said I'd mentioned just tips about going to your doctor, and the important part is being aware of the symptoms in the first place and having a clue that you think you might be perimenopausal. Do your research, do your homework, and if you are thinking that you're perimenopausal, obviously go to your doctor saying so. Provide, if you can, because a lot of e-consults now, you can't actually see anyone, but do your blood pressure, your weight, your height, and that can enable some of the factors that decide on prescribing. But say what you want, and
advocate for yourself.
And maybe if you really are struggling with GPs that don't particularly seem to get it or understand, then approaching someone like me that can be your advocate, that can put it in writing, and so that a GP can follow it, it's usually very helpful. We shouldn't have to do that, but the GPs are lagging behind on the awareness. It hasn't been a priority. There's been no money in it. So surprisingly or not, they've not had the training. So therefore it is filtering through, and they're having to do it because women are coming forward more informed than they are, which is really sad. But
also you can use that letter to help having a conversation with your manager.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you've got it all there in front of you, and sometimes those conversations a bit like, I don't know what to say. Actually, you can go through and say, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what my clinician has said, and think about this is what I need as well.
Start the conversation. So I have a few questions from the room. Thank you. So Julie's actually asking, do you have templates for what a menopause champion might look like?
I can certainly, with my Henpicked hat on, there is the Henpicked Menopause Hub. I'll share with you, Mita, afterwards the link to that. And they do have information there on what a champion role will look like.
Wonderful. And we'll share that with everyone. And Yvonne's asking about work policies. So she's asking if she could get some feedback from you on her work policies, or if anyone has a work policy. What's your timeline like for that?
We would need to we're probably best to have an offline conversation, but we can do that. Obviously there is a consultancy fee. But, you know, it wouldn't be exorbitant, but definitely we can have a conversation, reach out, and we can have that call and work out what it would look like.
Yeah. And likewise for myself, I, like you, Jeanette, love talking about it. 5-10 minute conversation, not a problem. If we need to dig in and do some work, then absolutely we can talk about what that would look like. But first and foremost, you know, the whole premise of today is to raise awareness, get the conversation started, and let's make a difference out there, you know. Actually, Yvonne also mentioned the British Menopause Organisation for resource. Do you recommend that as well, Jeanette? Are they a good organisation? Lisa, tell me.
British Menopause Society, absolutely. The Women's Health Concern, they are the patient arm of the British Menopause Society. So if you want to look for lots of information, leaflets, advice, then you can go to the Women's Health Concern. They're really reputable because we follow guidelines, we follow the evidence.
Yes.
So some consultants out there, private specialists, do go above recommendations by the British Menopause Society for various doses of things. So actually, there's lots of good out there, but for good quality advice, I'd go to Women's Health Concern.
And actually, from the workplace side, obviously, you'll all have HR teams that should, she says, fingers crossed, know about this. But certainly the CIPD, which is the HR professional body, has lots of fantastic guides for managers and support. But equally, ACAS, who obviously give free advice and support, have an awful lot of information about workplace adjustments. You've also got the HSE site, the Health and Safety Executive, for risk assessments, and of course the Equalities and Human Rights Commission.
Yeah. You know, wow. I mean, God, we did that in an hour and I feel like we could talk a lot more, but I just think there's so much for everyone to go away with. I've got a great comment from Tara saying that it's been such a reassuring session, the most reassuring session that she's attended in a long time, because she knows she's perfectly normal, and you are, and you all are, and so are the people in your organisation that might be presenting with challenges. But, you know, let's just get the conversation started and let's look out for each other and help each other. Let's get to being successful and happy. That's what it's about.
Let me take that. I'll stop that slideshow. There you go.
Oh my God. So, I, as I said, would love to continue this, but I'm going to put the poll results out there for everyone to see. That very much the training and awareness was the top marks. And so Jeanette and Lisa, thank you so much. What an informative, enlightening and reassuring session.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Enjoyed it. Always do enjoy doing these.
Well, watch this space for more sessions like this in the future for everyone who's either watching live or watching a recording. But please share this with other people in your organisation or people you know that don't quite get it yet. This will be such good use of their time. And
I always say that if you take one thing away, go talk about it with your colleagues. Be the little pebble in the pond that creates the ripples.
And on that, I think we've said thank you, Jeanette. Thanks everyone for joining today. Lisa, thanks for your wisdom and knowledge as well. And we're going to say bye for now, but watch out for the recording later on today.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.